Good morning. Welcome to Kingsport News Hour. For the 16th year of Changi, we're in the seventh month now and the third day of the heavenly calendar. Timilo sitting in for the second king of Changi Kamjinmin. Right? And let's take our normal tour, morning tour around the kingdom. Right now in Chongqing, Tennessee, it is 57 degrees and clear, getting up to 76 today. Tonight, partly cloudy and 53, so that looks like some nice temperature there. Nice weather there. And then at the Cheongju village or county, actually, Cheongju County, where father was born in what is now North Korea. Currently mostly cloudy and 75 degrees, getting out to 71 tonight. Cloudy and humid, and mostly sunny tomorrow and humid, high of 84. And then at the Cheonryung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, currently 63, mostly cloudy, 81 for a high today. Thunder shower in spots. It's early this morning, variable cloudiness. And then tonight, 52. Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground, clear 65. That's a nice start to the day, but it's still going to get warm. It's going to get up to 96 today, sunny to partly cloudy and very warm, actually, and low of 70 tonight. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, clear and 82 right now. 78 for a low tonight, warm and very humid with increasing cloudiness, passing late night shower or two. Tomorrow, 92 for a high, cloudy, hot, and very humid in afternoon, thunderstorm in spots. And then at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 88 cloudy right now, and 77 for a low tonight, mostly cloudy, warm, and very humid with periods of rain and a thunderstorm this evening, followed by a shower in spots late. Tomorrow, hot, actually a high of 95, hot and humid with some sun and increasing clouds, a little afternoon rain. Okay. That's in, that was in Gunma, and then down in Taiwan in Ilan, 86 and clear right now. Let's see, maybe not. Let's update this. 87 and clear right now, and getting down to 76 tonight, mainly clear skies. 93 tomorrow, variable cloudiness and a thunderstorm in spots in the afternoon. All right, so then, Father's word. Like, I promise tomorrow I'll get it. I just arrived in my hotel room. I have to unpack everything still, and I neglected to unpack the anyway, the book with Father's words. I apologize for that. Right. Let's go see what's happening right now. Yesterday on one of the Sunday programs, Vice President Vance said that Russia has made significant concessions. Well, he's not a very objective source. Obviously, his job is to sort of promote President Trump's position and policies, and so he may be stretching it a bit. But what it gets down to, basically, he says that we are trying to negotiate as much as we can with both the Russians and Ukrainians to find a middle ground to stop the killing, and so forth and so on. And the moderator says, "Well, you talk about concessions, and yet Russia rejected the ceasefire proposal that President Trump put forward. There's no meeting planned between President Putin and President Zelensky. And this week, Russia targeted an American factory in Ukraine. There were 600 people inside at the time. No one was killed. What makes you think President Putin is serious about peace?" So, actually, this is a very good point by this moderator, and he did. So then Vance came out and made what he sort of. So he said, um, and importantly, here's the meat of it. They've acknowledged that there's going to be some security guarantee to the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So I think it's just one sentence really that makes this newsworthy. They've acknowledged that there's going to be some security guarantee to the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Right. Okay. Uh, trying to focus on every he's trying to focus on the nitpicky details of how what to do. The parties disagree on. Okay, so so praising the Trump President Trump there, which is of course is his job. So he says that Trump is or that Russia is now Putin is now going to acknowledge the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Well, depends on how you define that, I suppose. I mean, if you, from the Ukrainian standpoint, territorial integrity means okay. Does this mean you're going to give us back the Crimean Peninsula? I doubt it. I doubt it very much. So we'll have to see what exactly is meant by territorial integrity. But at least on some level, Vance is maybe trying to stretch things a bit, but saying that there has been some progress that Russia is conceding more than they were in the beginning. And I suppose the security guarantee, I think he did point out that the security guarantee is something that Russia was flatly refusing in the beginning. And that may be true. And I think that perhaps is a sign of progress there. But there's still a long ways to go. And President Trump is becoming very frustrated with Putin again. And I don't blame him. And I don't blame those who doubt that President Putin is actually interested in peace at all, at least as long as he's winning. If it were to come to pass that he starts to lose or he's getting pushed back, then he may become more interested in peace. That may be the reality of the situation. But it's really America. You know, the United States needs to get this war off of our plate as quickly as possible because we got other matters that we need to take care of. And let's see here. But here, so here, this author actually is basically saying exactly that. Fiddling while Rome burns, America ignores China's rising red tide, saying that, you know, America is too distracted by Ukraine while China is building its military at an amazing pace, an incredible pace. While Washington obsesses over Ukraine and the Middle East, the Chinese Communist Party is building the most formidable military challenge the United States has faced in generations. Beijing is adding mass, reach, and persistence across sea, air, missile, space, cyber, and AI, while our armed forces are stretched thin, underfunded, and mismatched for the threat. The result, China is preparing simultaneous dilemmas for the United States and its allies, exploiting economic and military gaps we have failed to close. If we don't act, we may wake up to a world where freedom is in retreat and Beijing calls the shots. National security strategy rightly identifies China as the pacing challenge, yet our force structure still reflects a Cold War era dispersion of commitments. U.S. troops are tied down in NATO, deterring Russia. In the Middle East, Iran's nuclear ambitions and proxy militias demand a constant American presence. This multi-front posture leaves our Indo-Pacific deterrent dangerously underpowered. When we talk about pivoting to Asia, the pivot never happened. Remember, this was Obama, I think it was, wasn't it, that talked about pivoting to Asia. We face an adversary with the world's largest navy, a rapidly, well, at least in terms of the number of ships, it is the largest, that's true, a rapidly expanding missile force, but it's still far, at least the nuclear missiles are still far below the United States and Russia, and new footholds from the South China Sea to the Arctic, and we still rely on overstretched carrier strike groups and underfunded shipbuilding to deter them. Xi Jinping has ordered the People's Liberation Army to be ready by 2027 to take Taiwan. History suggests Beijing won't wait for perfect readiness before acting. From Korea in 1950 to Vietnam in 1979, Chinese leaders launched wars despite glaring military gaps because political calculation outweighed caution. Well, in the case of 1950 in Korea, MacArthur's forces were literally on the Yalu River. So, yeah, Beijing says, "Okay, you guys, we gotta do something. We gotta do something now." And so they came across the river. Then it wasn't just a military calculation, a political calculation. It was a military necessity. Vietnam in 1979. Oh yeah, okay. That was when they fought a war against Vietnam and lost. Yes, that was probably more of a political calculation. It and by the way, they lost that war against Vietnam in 1979. Well, that shows you that they're not invincible. Today, the PLA arsenal is staggering. Precision strike, and it goes through all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we can look at this and wring our hands. Um, but this is why I've been saying that President Trump at some point may need to make a very difficult and hard decision, and a decision that is going to get him a lot of criticism, bring him a lot of criticism from Europe and from especially from the Ukrainian people. But at some point, he may have to say, "Yeah, you know what, Ukraine, we just we've tried and we failed, or we haven't been able to make as much progress as we wanted, but we've got this other thing going on in Asia, and we've lost the ability to fight two wars at once. And we'll help as much as we can, but our focus is going to have to shift to China." At some point, I think President Trump is going to have to make that very difficult decision. I hope he doesn't. And maybe this is what Russia is waiting for. Maybe this is what Putin is calculating, that at some point China is going to distract the United States over towards Russia or Asia, and then Putin will have a free hand in Ukraine. Perhaps that's Putin's calculation. I don't know. But yeah, the United States is in a kind of a difficult position right now. Now, for a for a little bit of hopium, we can look at this story. Will Russia collapse? At least they put the question mark on it. And who knows? Who knows? Information about President Putin's health and is, of course, very secret. And also, well, look at the example of Park Chung-hee in 1979, where he was assassinated by his own chief of CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. So, in these uh, political systems where power is concentrated in one person, and there's a great deal of secrecy around that person, then literally anything can happen at any day. So anyway, let's take a look at this, see what it is. Um, it's Russia is not facing imminent collapse, but its economy is increasingly challenged by the Kremlin's continuing war in Ukraine, the country's reliance on volatile oil revenues, and the effects of Western sanctions. Despite some resilience in the face of these challenges, Russia's economy faces growing pressure, especially due to reduced oil income and increased military spending. Internal factors such as potential labor shortages and social unrest also undermine the regime's stability. And all that is true, although oil, I think, is still in the 60s, right? $60 range. And so it's still profitable um, for Russia. Hasn't come down so much that it becomes unprofitable. Let me just see what the oil price is right now. I like to look at these things. Today, this morning, oil prices, 64 for West Texas Intermediate and 68 for the Brent. So yeah, it's not as much as it used to be. It's not in the 70s. That's true. But it's still a fairly comfortable price for Russia. If it gets down into the 40s, then they're really in trouble. Russia's economy is increasingly geared towards supporting the war effort, leading to increased military spending and potentially hindering civilian sector growth. Western sanctions, especially those targeting Russian oil and gas exports, have significantly affected Russia's revenue streams. The war has exacerbated labor shortages in Russia, leading to increased wages and potential cash flow issues for business outside the defense sector. Who is it that said that Russia is a gas station masquerading as a country? Well, I'm sorry. I'm sure people in Russia would object to that strenuously, but there is something to that. Russia basically survives on what it can dig out of the ground, or also, of course, it has some exports in lumber and also I think in grain as well. I think, um, but basically though it's oil and gas, coal, these kinds of things that underpin the economy. Um, and its manufacturing sector, as far as I'm aware, is very well weak compared to many other countries. Rising prices, particularly for imported goods, are affecting the Russian public, which could lead to social unrest. If the war continues and the economy remains strained, there is a risk of hyperinflation and a collapse of the wartime economy. Russian President Putin his continued control over the political system remained a key factor in Russia's stability. Challenges to his authority could emerge if the war continues to go poorly or the economy deteriorates significantly. Russia has kept a lid on bad news about the war as it controls the media and manages reports of casualties that are released to the public. In reality, Russia has suffered more than 1 million casualties in the war in Ukraine, and it is not a matter of if, but when that information truly hits the public. It is bound to cause unrest, and Putin remains unwilling to discuss a peace deal to stop the war. When Russia um, was in Afghanistan, uh, there were a lot of casualties there as well, and that affected public opinion. And eventually, Russia had to pull out of Afghanistan as a result of that. So there may be something to this, and I guess they're doing a better job of sort of hiding the information or blocking the information about the casualties in Ukraine than they did in Afghanistan case. Retired U.S. Army General Lieutenant Ben Hodges was the first to recognize the threat Russia faces from collapse shortly after the invasion began in 2022. The retired three-star general was the former head of the European Command, was also the one-time Pershing Chair for Strategic Studies at the Center for European Policy Analysis. There are centrifugal forces at work that are going to pull it apart, Hodges told Australia's ABC News Daily podcast. I believe we need to be prepared for the possibility of the breakup of the Russian Federation. Well, that would be um, that would be quite something. That's the Soviet Union broke up, but the Russian Federation remained intact, and it was the Central Asian countries, the East Asian countries, the Caucasian, the places like Georgia and where else there? Georgia and Azerbaijan and Armenia, and well, also of course, Ukraine and in the Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and then also Moldova, for example, and Hungary, Poland. These places got independence. Um, Czechoslovakia at the time. But if Russian Federation itself breaks up, that is something different, and that would be quite a change. And China would certainly be strongly tempted then to increase its control over eastern Siberia and perhaps take back some of the territories that I talked about before, the territories that it lost to Russia during the 19th century, including Vladivostok. That was originally a Chinese city with a Chinese name, and other areas as well over there in the northeast. So, breakup of the Russian Federation would certainly change the world map quite a bit. Yuri Baldanov wrote an intriguing piece for Euromaidan Press on why Russia is headed for collapse. A few bullet points from Baldanov. The population is decreasing by 1 million annually, and the demographic potential needed to maintain Putin's planned empire has already been exhausted. This decline disproportionately affects ethnic Russian regions, while the Caucasus maintains population growth. A pattern that intensifies ethnic and religious tensions, because the Caucasus, I think, is this is Chechnya and places like that are largely Muslim. So it would certainly intensify ethnic and religious tensions there. Under Putin's leadership, Russia has developed into pure kleptocracy. Kleptocracy, of course, is the rule by thieves, thievery, and national corruption is rampant. While national resources concentrated in the hands of a tiny elite, this corruption-fueled system paralyzes normal economic development, replacing the rule of law with a network of personal loyalties and informal agreements. Putin has achieved unprecedented levels of social demotivation, creating exactly what he sought: an atomized, opportunistic society. The result is a population stripped of meaning and motivation. The war in Ukraine has only deepened this crisis, producing a massive class of armed, traumatized criminals who will struggle to reintegrate into civilian life. As the news from Ukraine shows no sign of improving, the country's resistance remains steadfast, and Western support only seems to be strengthening. Putin is beginning to see the war as unwinnable, or at best as leading to a Pyrrhic victory. Owen Matthews, a correspondent for The Independent. Wow, Owen Matthews is getting up in the world, isn't he? He believes that Russia today is living on borrowed time. Russia has begun running a fiscal deficit of some 1.5% of GDP, Matthew writes, and most seriously of all, global oil prices have fallen a precipitous 35% this year. As a result, Russia's central bank is set to print 15 trillion rubles in cash come October, the largest issuance since the hyperinflation of the 1990s. According to a study by Levada, Russia's last independent pollster in June, 64% of respondents favored peace talks, which is 6 percentage points up since March. At the same time, the number of people who wanted the war to continue fell to 28%, down from 34% in March. Putin agreed to come to Alaska to get President Trump to broker a peace treaty. He hopes Trump will guarantee Russia's claims to the Ukrainian regions of Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson without Russia having to fight over them any longer. But the Monday meeting in Washington between Trump and a number of European leaders showed that Putin overplayed his hand. While US media flocked to show that Putin had beaten Trump, the NATO countries coming to the White House in solidarity for Ukraine are putting Putin in a corner. If he refuses to meet with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, Putin will once again be cast as a pariah. Putin played for time, but time is running out. He may not fall tomorrow or even this year, but Russia cannot keep up this war with Ukraine if it faces collapse. See, this author he served as U.S. Army Special Forces NCO and warrant officer. Okay, he covers the NFL. He covered the NFL. Okay, war by other means, I guess. Member of the Pro Football Writers of America. So his work is regularly featured in many military publications. Okay, let's see. I don't know. Yeah, all right, okay. I don't know. His CV is a little bit weak, but he makes some interesting points. Makes some interesting points, I think. Okay, but we'll see. Like I said, we really cannot know exactly what's going on there. But we'll have to see if Russia goes into hyperinflation, as he implies. Then it may be that he'll be forced to come to terms and even give up Crimea, perhaps. That would be the worst, I think, worst possible scenario from his point of view. All right, now let's see. Today, Monday, President Trump is also meeting the South Korean president, Lee Jae-myung. Ooh, yeah, because this guy, you know, our blessed central families in South Korea really uh, poured their heart out and really tried everything to um, fight against this, to campaign against this man, but in the recent election. But you know, well, what do you say? What are you going to do? He is the president right now. Um, let's see what that's what he looks like. Okay. Here, let's look at this Reuters article. South Korea's new president, Lee Jae-myung, will face a pivotal moment on Monday when he meets U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington for their first summit as the country's decades-old alliance strains to confront rapid geopolitical changes. Much is riding on the meeting for Lee, who took office in June after a snap election called after his conservative predecessor, defeated in Washington for his hard line on North Korea, was removed for attempting to impose martial law. South Korea's economy relies heavily on the U.S., with Washington underwriting its security with troops and nuclear deterrence. Lee hopes to chart a balanced path of cooperation with the U.S. while not antagonizing top trade partner China. As, as he headed to the U.S., Lee sent a special delegation to Beijing, which delivered a message calling for normalized relations with China that have been strained in recent years. South Korea has long come under targeted criticism from Trump, who has called it a money machine that takes advantage of American military protection. Lee will seek to make a good impression, to connect personally with Trump, and above all, avoid any unpleasant surprises, analysts said. For Lee, a no-news summit, I think, would be good, said Victor Cha of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. As part of the preparations for the summit, Lee told reporters during his flight to Washington that he had read Trump, The Art of the Deal. Under heavy pressure from Trump's administration, South Korean negotiators secured a last-minute deal last month to avoid the harshest of new U.S. tariffs, but they must still hammer out details of billions of dollars in promised investments in the United States. South Korean officials say they hope such working-level trade negotiations will largely be left for other meetings. There are many major topics in the security field, Lee's top policy aide Kim Young-bom said last week. Our position is that trade was already finalized last time. We hope that specific implementation plans for trade won't be included in the summit at all, or at least should be kept simple if discussed. Several top officials, including the foreign minister, rushed to Washington over the weekend to try and iron out final details. Lee, who arrived in Washington on Sunday, will highlight some of South Korea's expected investments when he visits a shipyard in Philadelphia owned by the country's Hanwha Group after the summit. Cooperation to help the ailing U.S. shipbuilding sector is part of the broad tariff agreement reached between the two countries. Trump is expected to pressure Lee to commit to more spending on defense, including potentially billions of dollars more toward the upkeep of 28,500 American troops stationed in South Korea. Wee Sung Lak, really? Is that really? Yeah, I guess that's what it says. Okay. It's going to sound like a South Korean name, but all right. Wee Sung Lak, I guess that is all right. Top security advisor said South Korea was in talks with Washington over defense spending, taking as a reference NATO's agreement on a big new defense spending target. We added that the government was also looking into a plan for the purchase of American weapons. While focusing on increasing military spending, Lee will likely seek to avoid conversations about a potential reduction of U.S. troops or using them for a wider range of operations. And this is actually, he's not going to be able to avoid that. This seems to be a sort of a main sort of a talking point for American security officials now. for Pentagon officials now. Remember, we had that. Who was it? The head of I get what it was the head of the U.S. Eighth Army, wasn't it? Was talking about the importance. It's not the numbers that are important, but rather the capabilities. That the capabilities need to be broadened or something like that. So the U.S. definitely wants U.S. Forces in Korea to be used for uh, uh, purposes other than just a deterrence against North Korea and specifically China, specifically China, and especially what role will these forces play if China attacks Taiwan? That's going to be a very important consideration for the United States, and that's going to be a tough one for Lee because he wants to be friendly with China. It was pointed out that China is the top trading partner with Korea, and certainly Korea's tourism industry relies a great deal on China and Chinese tourists. Excuse me. So this is going to be a major sticking point between the U.S. and South Korea, perhaps at this summit, but certainly going on down the line. Yes, and China is going to insist that not be the case, right? That U.S. forces in Korea only for deterrence against North Korea and nothing to do with China. That's going to be a strong point that Xi Jinping is going to try to make it with with Lee Jae-myung. So China is going to be watching this summit very carefully. Let's see here. Lee will likely seek to avoid conversations about a potential reduction of U.S. troops or using them for a wider range of operations or details on modernizing the alliance, said Du Yeon Kim from the Center for a New American Security. Lee told reporters it would be difficult for Seoul to accept the demand by the U.S. to adopt flexibility in operating the U.S. military station in South Korea. They should leave those topics for working level officials to hash out, Kim said. Ambition could backfire. Trump and Lee may also discuss efforts to persuade North Korea to freeze and eventually abandon its nuclear weapons program. You know, why I'm laughing, right? Okay. Even the CIA has said in congressional testimony, and let's say it again, because apparently someone's not listening. North Korea will not abandon its nuclear weapons. There has to be regime change before you get rid of nuclear weapons in North Korea. And even then, I don't know if there is regime change. Let's say North and South unite, centering on the South. There's going to be a very, very strong movement, opinion within South Korea saying, hey, now those nuclear weapons are our nuclear weapons. We want to keep those nuclear weapons. Of course, the US, Russia, China, and Japan will all say, no, 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 no. But I don't know. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. It'll be interesting to see who finally winds up with those nuclear weapons. I don't think they're going in the trash. Okay. Both leaders support engaging Pyongyang, and Lee has called for a phased approach to denuclearization. These guys, I don't know. Maybe they know it. Maybe they're just fantasizing. I don't know. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un says South Korea and the U.S. remain hostile to the country and will never give up his nuclear arsenal. Yeah. Hey, listen, he's telling the truth. Okay, he doesn't. He's telling the truth. Will never give up his nuclear weapons, nuclear arsenal. Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, he's. I don't know. Over the weekend, Kim supervised test firing of a new air defense systems. Before Lee meets Trump, the South Korean leader traveled to Tokyo to meet Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba on Saturday to underscore the importance of cooperation between South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. A commentary carried by North Korea's state media on Monday criticized Lee's despicable trip to Tokyo as a begging message toward the master of the White House by highlighting trilateral military cooperation. Lee and Ishiba discussed relations with Washington and U.S. tariff issues, and the Japanese leader shared his experience with Trump, which for Seoul was useful information before Lee's first meeting with Trump, said we, the South Korean security advisor. All right. Well, so I think, yeah, like one person was saying there, the best possibility for Lee is that he was able to get in Washington, meet Trump, shake his hands, and then get out of Washington without anybody ever hearing about it. In other words, a no news summit. Um, and I don't know what will happen with that. I don't know what will happen with that because President Trump, he tends to speak his mind, doesn't he? He does tend to speak his mind, and President Trump is going into this with the understanding that Lee Jae-myung is uh, not a friendly person towards America. That his policies are leftist and pro, at least friendly towards North Korea. Not he's not a hawk on North Korea at all, and also he wants to be friends with China, and so he wants to be very careful about how U.S. troops are are used in Asia. So there's a lot of possibility here for a blow up. Like maybe not as much as Zelensky experienced. I mean, at least Lee Jae-myung is going to wear a suit. At least he'll do that. So it won't be as bad as it was with Zelensky. But there could be some fireworks later on today. And actually, let's see, it's only a few hours from now that they're going to meet. So we will see what comes of this. It's going to be interesting, and we'll if there's any sort of stuff that comes out about this, we'll be talking about it in tomorrow's King's Report. Yes, so Monday with President Trump and President Lee. And we'll see what happens with that. It's going to be interesting. Yes. All right, let's see. Um, let's see what else is going on today. Of course, the media is talking about, the crime crackdown in DC, Chicago's next, maybe Baltimore, this kind of thing. Um, mhm. We'll see how that goes. And this illustrates that the Democrats have really neglected these cities. They've used them for votes in elections, but neglected to really solve the crime problem. And I think President Trump is illustrating the fact that Obama could have done a lot more, Biden could have done a lot more to solve the crime problems in these cities, these Democrat-controlled cities. I saw where one Democrat was saying, "Oh, look, he's only uh, targeting black majority cities. He's racist because those are the ones that have been neglected. He's going out. He's doing the work in the places that have been neglected the most. In other words, the Democrat-run cities, because Democrats have not been dealing with this problem, and President Trump is dealing with it. It'd be interesting to see how this affects President Trump's support among blacks and other minorities. But it could increase. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But of course, Democrats are up in arms about this. Um, there's not really much they can do about it except to complain and try to find something to connect this to racism. But it highlights how much they have not been doing for their own constituents, their own supporters. And now President Trump maybe uh, attracting those supporters away from the Democrats and perhaps even, I don't know, voting Republican. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. Sure, it's possible. Yeah. We'll see how this plays out. It's very interesting. All right, let's go to the Epic Times to see what's going on there. Trump to host South Korea's President Lee at the White House for trade defense talks. Okay, that's the lead this morning. And and Seoul has proposed a $150 billion investment plan called Make American Shipping Great Again. MASG. It doesn't really work. That's okay. Okay. And let's see what else was going on here. Well, we were going to do something else, weren't we? Let's see here. Mm, yeah, okay, yeah. I remember we were going to do this story. Okay. Yeah. Let's do this one. Inside Taiwan's fight against Beijing's silent invasion. Confronted with the infiltration and coercion tactics from the Chinese regime, Taiwanese society is fighting back. Right. And that says anti-communist. I can read that much Chinese. And what does this one in the background say? 10 men. Not quite make that out. Okay. Some 100 miles off the Chinese coast, the democratic island of Taiwan has existed for decades under a creeping communist shadow. Deeming it a breakaway province, the Chinese Communist Party has been steadily asserting control of the island, bullying it with military jets and simulating what Admiral Samuel Paparo, commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, calls rehearsals for attack. But as the world fixates on how and when Beijing will make its move, inside Taiwan, the battle is already on. It's a war without gunfire. Over the past few months, a grassroots movement has swept through Taiwan, aiming to remove dozens of lawmakers from a political party seen as selling out the nation's interests to Beijing. Ultimately, two-thirds of the targeted politicians survived a roll call vote on July 26th, an outcome that the movement's leaders and analysts say only underscores the depth of CCP infiltration. The legislators are members of the opposition Kuomintang Party, known today for its pro-Beijing leaning. Leading a slim majority in the legislature, the party provoked backlash after a series of unpopular moves, slashing Taiwan's defense budget, striking down bills that aimed to counter threats from China, and forcing through changes to expand the party's legislative power despite mass protests. When the power grab failed in court, the KMT-led coalition imposed a procedural rule that effectively paralyzed the Constitutional Court of Taiwan. Public anger boiled over in January with defense spending cuts the final straw. Calls to flip the legislature, dubbed the Great Recall, bubbled up throughout Taiwan. One rally calling out communist influence drew tens of thousands of people to the streets. Approximately 1.3 million Taiwanese signed petitions to unseat 1/5 of the island's lawmakers, all of whom are members of the KMT, in order to transfer more power to the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, which is more aligned with Western interests. Recall advocates faced an uphill battle as they attempted to take down officials in their respective strongholds. It was an unprecedented action in Taiwanese history, where only one Taiwanese lawmaker had ever been recalled. And also, these people had just won an election, a re-election. So they just won re-election by substantial margins. So to recall them is certainly a challenge. Although the campaign was a tactical defeat on its own, on a grander scale, it was a strategic victory, said Miles Yu, a China policy advisor in the first Trump administration. By taking the issue to the ballots, he said voters forced KMT lawmakers to defend themselves and clarify their stance on China, and that has shifted the discourse. The baseline right now is really about whether you're anti-communist or you are CCP friendly, he said on the China Insider podcast, which he hosts as director of the China Center at Hudson Institute. Yuan Hongbing, an exiled Chinese legal scholar with insider access to Beijing's top rung, said the turn of events represents an awakening. In the face of tyranny and coercion from the Chinese regime, Taiwanese society is fighting back, he told the Epoch Times, calling the situation an unprecedented battle. KMT has tried to shake off the pro-Beijing label. It acknowledges the importance of strong defenses, but continues to engage with mainland China, arguing that dialogues are crucial to calming tensions and promoting mutual benefits. What's going on here? Let's see here. The legislators of the Democratic Progressive Party protest against the opposition KMT, and Taiwan People's Party over legislative reforms in Taipei, Taiwan, May 21, 2024. Okay. The Democratic Island is small, about the size of Maryland, but it plays an outsized role in the global economy, churning out more than 90% of the world's most advanced chips, according to the US International Trade Commission. By some measures, Taiwan ranks among the freest societies in the world, a stark contrast with mainland China, where the CCP rules with an iron fist and punishes anyone deemed a challenge to its power. And that's the thing, that uh, dictators like Xi Jinping, and frankly, this was something that Park Chung-hee was also saying during the 60s and 70s, was that Western democracy is not suited to Asian countries. But Taiwan is an example of how that is not true. It's very much of a democracy today. It even has a communist party there. There's a communist, or it's small, of course, but they have a communist party, and the Kuomintang is a sort of friendly to China, friendly pro, or not pro maybe, but certainly friendly to CCP party. And so it is a vibrant democracy. They have fisticuffs in the legislature from time to time. I don't know if that's a measure of democracy, but it's certainly not a non-democracy, is it? But that freedom is increasingly under assault. Besides conducting near daily military harassment and live fire drills around Taiwan, Beijing has been intensifying a quieter attempt to penetrate the island from within. Since 2020, Taiwan has prosecuted 159 individuals for allegedly spying for China. Among them were 95 current or retired soldiers. With money in one hand and sticks in the other, the Chinese regime has secretly groomed informants from deep inside Taiwan's government to feed intelligence back to China and readily open the doors to the enemy when Beijing strikes, warned Taiwan's National Security Bureau. In March, Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te declared mainland China a foreign hostile force, describing the regime's extensive campaign to divide, destroy, and subvert us from within. He unveiled 17 countermeasures, including a stricter review process for visiting Chinese nationals, disclosures for cross-strait exchanges involving Taiwanese public officials, and clearer conduct guidelines for actors and singers working in China. A poll released in April by Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, an administrative agency responsible for handling China's affairs, showed that more than 70% of approximately 1,100 Taiwanese respondents believe that the Chinese regime is gaining ground and infiltrating Taiwan. They have also recently watched the CCP authorities tighten their grip on the once free-spirited Hong Kong, not far away. Yes, that's true. Of all the places in the world, Taiwan should be the staunchest against the Chinese Communist Party, Taiwanese social media influencer Wen Zuyu told the Epoch Times. Taiwan is the territory that the CCP most vies for. Taiwan is a centerpiece in the first island chain, the barrier against the Chinese regime's military aggression in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. And I think one of these is the president, I think. Maybe this guy in the middle, I guess. Conquering Taiwan would be the first step in a CCP campaign to take on the United States, according to Wen, who has become the face of the recall movement targeting KMT pro-Beijing lawmakers. Yuan holds the same view. Annex Taiwan and the CCP would have a gateway to expand its communist authoritarianism, he said. The fate of Taiwan is consequential to everyone in the 21st century. If Taiwan were to fall, the rest of the world, including the United States, would become more susceptible, said Representative Nathaniel Moran, Republican of Texas, who sits on the House Select Committee on the CCP. Taiwan is absolutely a testing ground, he told the Epoch Times. We have to be with Taiwan every step of the way. We cannot falter in that. Wen said his efforts against the CCP influence are motivated by the regime's broken promise regarding Hong Kong. 8 years ago, Wen briefly contemplated a career in mainland China. After graduating from college, he went on an all expenses paid trip to China to compete in a film competition, winning the third place prize. Around him, Chinese state companies and major media platforms extended dazzling offers designed to woo Taiwanese such as him. He nearly took the bait, but he said he was glad he did. He said, but he was glad he did it. 2 years later, in 2019, protests erupted in Hong Kong as millions of people resisted a bill allowing extraditions to mainland China. Yeah, and remember what happened to that, right? Millions, 2 million in a city of what, 9 or 10 million, something like that, 8 or 9 or 10 million, something like that. But then suddenly it got shut down, right? All of a sudden, overnight, shut down. How? COVID shut that down. As the former UK colony struggled to fend off Beijing's encroachment, Wen saw the perils that lay ahead for his homeland and just how close he had come to becoming a tool for the CCP propaganda machinery, one of its useful idiots, he said. Wen is now known as Pa Chung on YouTube, with 1.2 million subscribers who watch him pan Chinese propagandists and CCP bootlickers. No one was out there to warn me at the time, he said. All right. Despite the KMT's warmer relationship with Beijing, it was once the mortal enemy of communist forces attempting to overthrow KMT's rule. The two sides fought a fierce civil war. A decade into the war, in 1937, Japan invaded, giving the weaker communists a chance to rise while the KMT was distracted by the external foe. Yeah. Japan surrendered in 1945, but by then the KMT had few reserves left to fend off the CCP leader Mao Zedong's communists when the civil war resumed. In 1949, a KMT general was persuaded to open the gates of the capital, then known as Peiping, without a fight, cementing the CCP's victory and leading the KMT to retreat to Taiwan. That takeover became the Beiping model, the template that a Chinese general has referred to as the most desirable way to resolve the Taiwan issue. Then and now, Beijing relies on one of its magic weapons, the United Front Work Department, which hides its hand behind a broad network of state and non-state actors in a global operation to direct, buy, or coerce influence. For years, it ran some 100 secret police stations in more than 50 countries. Through individuals embedded in the Chinese diaspora and sometimes within Western governments, it harasses dissidents, tarnishes critics, and manipulates policies to its favor. One recent high-profile Taiwanese victim of intimidation was Vice President Hsiao Bi-khim. During Hsiao's 2024 visit to Prague weeks before taking office, a Chinese diplomat tailed her and attempted to ram her motorcade, an act that Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council likened to acts of political terror. As Taiwan's biggest trading partner, China has repeatedly wielded economic leverage as a weapon. It has blocked agricultural products while making deals with select KMT represented regions, putting the heat on Lai and his Democratic Progressive Party. The CCP's United Front also punishes Taiwanese businesses in China for stepping out of line, organizes pilgrimage visits for Taiwanese with mainland ancestry to tighten emotional bonds, entices Taiwanese celebrities to speak in Beijing's favor, installs eyes and ears in key Taiwanese state and civil sectors, and poaches Taiwan's diplomatic allies to isolate the island internationally. In the weeks leading up to Taiwan's 2024 elections, more than 100 village chiefs from the island took Beijing-sponsored trips to China, triggering election interference concerns. A little while ago, I saw one video by a I guess a Westerner, you'd say a Caucasian person, young man living in China, and he was saying, "Oh, this thing about the social credit score is such a lie. It doesn't even exist. It's just like there. Of course, there's something like the credit bureau reports in the United States, but nothing like they say, where if you criticize the regime, your score gets lowered or something like that. There's nothing like that, which of course is a complete lie. And obviously, he was being paid by this United Front. I'm, that's how they work. We really need to be careful about this kind of propaganda that's coming from China. The Chinese regime also cultivates political parties. How am I doing on time? We're 4 minutes. Okay. The Chinese regime also cultivates political parties to spread its messaging. In January, Taiwan's Ministry of the Interior asked the Constitutional Court to disband the China Unification Promotion Party, founded by crime syndicate boss Chang An-lo, on the grounds that the party was acting at the behest of the CCP. Prosecutors accused a couple affiliated with the party of spreading Chinese propaganda in exchange for cash, and sentenced another 3 people in March for recruiting military spies. I don't think enough people, though, are educated on this facet of how the PRC works. Michael Studeman, former commander of the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence and a retired Navy Rear Admiral, said at a July congressional hearing using the acronym for People's Republic of China. This is very much a part of a Leninist thinking, Leninist strategy. And there are opposition parties in North Korea, or non-communist parties in North Korea as well, right? There are even Christians or people who call themselves Christians, people who call themselves Buddhists, even in China, right? They have approved Christians, approved Buddhists, but they are all working with this United Front office, and they are all loyal to the Communist Party. That's how they work. So only 5 to 10% of the population is going to be actual members of the Communist Party. But then you have the other 99%, 95% people sort of grouped together as part of this United Front department. This is in all spectrum, all the time, all domains. It's more insidious than we want to give it credit for. The end goal, Studeman said, is to erode the Taiwanese public's will so that it acquiesces to or embraces a future under mainland Chinese rule. Compared with sending soldiers or firing off missiles, this less visible campaign has clear advantages, said Wang Xiaowen, an assistant research fellow with Taipei-based military think tank Institute for National Defense and Security Research. By using this tactic, she told the Epoch Times, the CCP is attempting to take Taiwan with the lowest cost. Frog in boiling water. we talk about this a lot, don't we? Right? Frog in boiling water. The Chinese regime's elaborate effort to lure the Taiwanese was outlined in a documentary when released in December 2024, featuring a former pro-Beijing figure, Taiwanese rapper Chen Poyuan. Feigning interest in a Chinese venture, Chen flew to the nearest Chinese province, Fujian, and through his mainland connections met with a Taiwan-born man who had pocketed the equivalent of a $700,000 state subsidy to run a startup incubator targeting Taiwanese influencers. The man flashed his mainland residency card, then quickly warned Chen to not publicize the fact because he was breaking a Taiwanese law in procuring it. The card comes with many perks for the Taiwanese, and he told Chen that he could get him one like it in a month. The man had office space and subsidized housing for anyone willing to make videos boosting the regime's image. He promised tens of thousands of dollars in venture funds. They go step by step, Chen told the Epic Times. They start off simple, giving you a bit of money for some normal travel promotion. But once one gets a taste of it, the handlers may press farther. Sooner or later, the influencers have to check their behavior and, and toe the party line, he said, likening the situation to a frog in boiling water. The documentary, upon release, quickly racked up millions of views. And knew the CCP playbook firsthand. Born in 1999, he learned martial arts at the Shaolin Temple at age 13 and later enrolled in Hua Kuo University. Oh, I'm out of time. Okay. All right. So, still going on here. But anyway, you can read it yourself in the Epic Times. But this is an excellent article. But this sort of United Front department, this is common in all all communist regimes. I mean, the Soviet Union had it, and every Eastern European country had it. It's only a very small sort of minority that gets to be has to the honor of being a member of the Communist Party, but then everybody else is somehow connected through this United Work Department, and this is what they're doing. And well, isn't it auspicious? Isn't it good? Isn't it providential that the second king is working there now and establishing God's base there in Taiwan? So let's continue to pray that that will be victorious. All right, gotta go. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.